Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Usman Sadiq Paracha, and today we would be having our lecture number 1 of the subject Applied Quantitative Analysis and Practices. So just to introduce myself, basically I am a civil engineer. I did my MBA in Human Resource Management and then my MS in Management and PhD in Strategic Human Resource Management. So basically I have worked extensively in different organizations related to business administration and engineering as well. Also I had the chance to do various business analytics for various firms as well, and based on that my interest lies in the subjects of quantitative business analysis, statistical analysis, quantitative techniques, strategic human resource management, and subjects which are likewise similar to this one. So in our subject, basically this, as the name clearly depicts, it's applied quantitative analysis and practices. So this subject is more or less related to the various situations which arise in business organizations and in which the organizational hierarchy has to analyze those situations quantitatively, because now the focus is more on the quantification of all types of phenomena which are occurring within the organization, whether they are tangible or they are intangible. In both cases, now the focus of the business administration work is to document these processes, to document these phenomena, whether they are related to the physical infrastructure, whether they are related to the intangible resources like human resource, like attitudes and behavior of the workforce, like the organizational commitment of the workforce. So all these factors which exist as an internal force within an organization need to be documented, and then once they are documented and then quantified, then the need arose which basically stressed on to the analysis of such factors, so that we can be able to focus on educated decisions, more informed decisions, instead of assessing a situation or phenomena of an organization by just subjective means or just by opinions or views. Now the focus has shifted to the quantification of all these processes. So that's why the quantitative analysis and practices subject is of vital importance in this case, and that's why we have already basically added this word applied on this subject, because now this quantitative analysis is not just limited to theoretical perspective of business organization. It is now more focused on the practical aspects and the practical situation and how we can apply these theoretical justifications in applied sense. So basically this applied perspective has driven the organizational hierarchy to just abandon the typical conventional management approach to just measure the workforce performance through number of hours in an organization. So it has now more focused on how to basically use and motivate the workforce and use this positive energy to enhance the organizational productivity. Now, in order to just include these intangible factors in first evaluating the organizational productivity and then considering the enhancement and the improvement of the organizational working, it is very much vital to first lay the rules and basics of quantifying all these processes and all these models, I would say. Now, basically, model terminology is very much used again and again now, specifically in business research perspective, and we will keep on discussing this so-called term model again and again, and we will discuss it in future that what do this term model means here. So, coming to the description of this course, our focus is on the handling of data and presentation. Now, as we know very well that data basically is related to the information. So, now in today's era, the information is so much around us, and there is so much wealth of information lying in form of internet and all other resources, that now this has become an art to basically acquire the related information and then extract the related data from it and then present it properly. So we will focus on how to basically quantify this data, which is presented to us mostly in the form of subjective terms, and how basically this whole phenomena is just within our reach in the form of observation, and how we can then quantify it and present it. Then in this course we would also focus on the visual presentation, because that's the first step towards the analysis, that you, once you get the data, then you try to present the data in a meaningful way. So we will focus on the tools which are required for this presentation and how to use the latest softwares to present such kind of heavy data for our case. Then again, we can have to collect the data in all this process. So what are the main methods to collect data, specifically in context of business administration? Which methods are better and which are not, and in what situation which method should be preferred would be discussed here in this course. Then again, how to interpret complex data, because now the data form is very much sophisticated and it's not that easy just to codify the data into mathematical form. The first step is to first realize the sophistication of this data and then properly codify it, and then we would be able to move on to its presentation and further steps. So then again, there is the estimation and the description of the data basis on the basis of the information. So this is kind of vital again, because the description of data and estimation is a very, very crucial part of this subject. Then once we have discussed the theoretical aspect and the phenomena which keep on occurring in our organization, depending upon the situation in which we are in, then how we can interpret these theoretical occurrences into mathematical form, and how this whole information and business phenomena can be interpreted mathematically and then presented. We will discuss this in this course, and then all this conversion and the formulation of results and conclusions will be made using the software called as SPSS. So basically throughout our whole course we will be focusing on first the theoretical aspect, theoretical issues and the observations which are there in the theory and has been presented by various practitioners and theorists and who have observed different occurrence of phenomena within the business organization we will discuss that in detail, and then we will practically present those issues and how those issues can be analyzed and presented in the form of a model. And once we have converted those intangible and subjective issues in the form of a model in a quantitative form, then how to basically collect data related to that model, and then how that model can be interpreted and then mathematically solved to give us some concrete results to solve the issues within the business organization. And using, once we have described these models, then how to basically collect the data and then use the software in this case. So basically in this whole course we will be basically at first step present the theoretical issues, then we will present the model as an example, and then how to collect the relevant data, and then how to tabulate that data in the software, and once we tabulate that data, then how to analyze that data in a more meaningful way to give us some critical information which we really want out of that kind of data basically which is presented to us. So then again our objective here is related to the data as center of gathering information, and basically how to interpret this data, how to convert this subjective information into data. Then we will be focusing on the techniques which are focused on the collection of different types of data, and what would be the mathematical and statistical interpretation, what would be our consideration in this case, and what should we be focusing upon while trying to gather this kind of technical data. Then the research techniques, because these techniques are kind of vital when we are trying to collect different kind of data, and in business research the nature of research techniques is obviously different. So even to ponder upon the issues which are very much empirical and practical in nature while dealing with different kind of organization, we do need the research techniques, and we do need these tools to effectively give us the conversion of the subjective information into objective information, and then to very sophisticatedly give us interpretation of the real happening in mathematical form. And obviously when we are gone through that, then we have to generate this useful information, because this again is now an art to generate very useful and meaningful information from all this exercise which we have to do. Then ultimately our objective would be to do this data analysis using data software, because as the mathematical techniques to solve these kind of objective issues within an organization are becoming more and more complex, and it's not just now possible to apply conventional formulas and to try to solve these issues by manually stating the formulas and manually calculating them. So now as organizations are expanding, their volume is increasing, the nature of the market is increasing, the nature of the problems of business organization is becoming more and more complex. So is the data information is also becoming complex. So we cannot just apply typical mathematical and statistical formulas manually and start calculating them manually. So it is now vital to use various softwares which help us and aid us in effectively performing these calculations without any mistake and give us precise information which we require as a result of these quantitative analysis. So we have to basically leave the conventional methodology of going through the formulas, though it is very much important that one should know what's the implication of the formula, how the formula is solved, and we will go through that. We will state the formulas and the concept, and manually, if we are presenting a very simple information, then how to convert that simple information into objective form, and how to solve this manually through the simple formulas, so that the process is very much evident to the student. And then after you understand the simple formulas and their implication, then the complex problems can be presented, can be understood, and then they can be effectively basically solved using this software. So though conventional way is a part of this course to a certain extent, so that the concept of these different tools and mathematical techniques is clear to you. But after that, yes, we will go through the practical application and the practical examples and practical issues which the business organization face, and then we will discuss how to convert them into model and solve them using these sophisticated softwares. So as a result of this course objective, we have got certain contents, and we will discuss these contents in more detail in coming lectures. The first is related to the definition and collection of data, and how we define it, how we collect such vital information which is spread around us, and we have to basically choose which is relevant to us and which is not relevant to us, how to convert this into mathematical form. So this is quite vital in this subject, and that's why it's one of the foundation of this subject. So when we go through this defining and collection of data, then the next step is how to organize them, and we are using a terminology here termed as variables, and we will discuss in this lecture today that what do we mean by this terminology called variables here, and then how to organize them, how to visualize this data which is vital to us. And again, by organizing and visualizing them, then we can easily identify the various trends, the nature of the data, and then from that some very important conclusions can be withdrawn before commencing with the more complex analysis. So the next is related to the numerical descriptive measures, which will be discussed in detail. Obviously, all these contents which we are discussing, with each content and with each subtype of content which we will discuss, alongside with that we will also discuss its application in the software, and also the practical example related to that, so that you are very much clear in the application of the theoretical aspect of this subject which is presented to you, and likewise how to apply the software to tackle that practical problem and application. So similarly, we will be discussing about normal distribution. Again, this is a very important aspect of this subject. The confidence interval estimation, again, these are technical terms which we will discuss in detail in future lectures. Likewise, hypothesis testing, what is hypothesis, and why this is vital to our subject, again would be discussed in more detail in future lectures. Then we will be going through the simple linear regression, one of the most important foundation of quantitative analysis, and again more advanced form of this analysis has been introduced, and that's why we will be then moving ahead with multivariate data analysis, which would include multiple regression, factor analysis, or to assess the reliability and validity of the various tools which we use in analyzing the data for business organization. So basically all these contents are technical terms which may seem quite confusing to you right now, but as we move ahead step by step, then you will start understanding what is the implication of these important theoretical concepts. And then when we go through the practical examples of these cases, you would be very much clear how to identify the patterns within data, how to tackle a practical situation mathematically, and how to extract vital information so that you are able to make informed decision in a better way. Then we have the textbooks here which are related to this subject, and from here you can go through the Essentials of Statistics, a tool for social science by Joseph Healy. Then we have got another book termed as Business Statistics by Sharp, DeVaux, and Wellman. In terms of software usage and the software application of these subjects, you can consult Discovering Statistics using SPSS by Andy Field. These books are available in the form of e-books online too. You can also access them there. These topics basically which we have discussed in the form of course contents are available in nearly every business statistic and mathematics book. So in every book which is related to business statistics or social science statistics or business mathematics, all these topics are covered there well in detail, and those can be referred and can be used as a reference book, and you can very much easily grab vital information from those books as well. Likewise in SPSS, Andy Field book would be quite much help to you, and also its e-books are available online also, and these books can be ordered from the local market as well. Basically there are many other books which are available also for the application of these quantitative analysis using SPSS, and these books can be also be consulted to follow this subject here. So coming to our present lecture, in which we will have a discussion about what is data and what would be our variables, then what are the variable types which we will discuss here. Likewise, what are the different levels of measurement which should be considered, then what are the different sources of data, and what should be the process for data cleaning, and what are the different types of sampling. So all these so-called technical terms which may be confusing to you right now, we will discuss it in detail now so that you have a clear idea of what's the scope and the foundation of this subject here. Coming to our first topic, which is related to the defining and collection of data, and when we come to that, basically we come to our very basic of this data, which is termed as the information, and it's also termed as data, and then we come across a term which is called variables, and variables basically are the various aspects of data which we will discuss, and in other words, we will also have a detailed discussion on what's the nature of variable. There are two types of variables here, One is the categorical variable that has a value which can be placed in two categories termed as yes and no. And then we have got numerical variables that represent a measured quantity, and here it is divided into two types called discrete and continuous variables. In case of discrete variables, we are basically dealing with counting process and those items which can be counted as well. Continuous variables basically arise from the measuring process, and again they are comprising of those items which cannot be counted and measured in a more continuous form. We will discuss this in detail in forward. As we have basically discussed this main type in detail here, basically now explaining this thing, that variable basically is the characteristic of an item or an individual. And here basically the data is related to the set of these individual values which are associated with the variable here. So in this case, both data and variable will be used around and around again and again in this whole subject, and both are of vital importance to us. Then dealing with this word called statistics. These are related to the methods basically that help transform data into useful information, and basically that's what statistics deals with. But again, we will discuss also in detail that statistics is in reality related to the sample, and as we have got large populations while dealing with different business organizations, so we have to basically take out samples from these populations, as we cannot cover the whole population as well. So once we are dealing with the sample, then we have to deal with statistics here. So here, to be more precise, let's have a look at the types of variables diagrammatically. And here you can see that the categorical variables here are very much evident, and in this case the examples are marital status, political party, eye color. Now these are basically those variables which have got very defined categories, and for example in marital status you have got single or married, so we have got two categories. Political parties depends whether which political party you want to choose, so whatever the party is, it has categories. Then we are dealing with eye color, whichever eye color is there. So these are concrete categories in which we are dealing with. Then we have got the other type of variable, also termed as numerical variable. And there are two main types, which are discrete and continuous. In discrete, again, we are kind of dealing with whole numbers, and that's why we are terming them as counted items. So those items which can be counted concretely. Then we have got other examples for measured characteristics, also termed as continuous variable. And in this case, these values do contain decimals or measured quantity in the continuous form, so that's why these variables are termed as continuous variables here. Coming to another issue, which is related to level of measurement. Now here the level of measurement includes the nominal scale, and again this scale is dividing the categorical variables into various categories, and the nominal scale is in fact dealing with categories here. And in softwares, basically, instead of we define the data in terms of nominal, or in other words categorical variable, or discrete or continuous variable, we have to basically state the scales, and we do not need to enter whether the variable is continuous or discrete or categorical. So in softwares they have got their own terminology, so let's say we can assess that levels of measurement here are basically described in software as well in the same way. So in nominal scale, basically we are dealing with distinct categories, and in which basically there is no ranking at all. And as you can see here, that for example, we can say that here, do you have a Facebook account? So we are answering it with yes and no. And again, between these two categories, there is no ranking involved. So these both categories are of equal importance. Likewise, other subjects, other questions or variables are related to type of investment, which comprise of growth, value or other, but again in cellular provided as well, all these options carry equal weight. There is no ranking here, or there is no weightage here based on which we can term one option higher than the other. So in nominal scale, that's why we are dealing with distinct categories here. Then we have got another scale which is also termed as ordinal scale, and in which basically we are dealing with ranking. So that's the property of ordinal scale here. Now as you can see in this example, that we are stating the variable as student class designation. Now the first order is the freshman part, then sophomore, junior and senior. So the order is increasing, and there is certain kind of ranking which exists within this ordinal scale. That's why this level of measurement is more explaining to us as compared to the previous nominal scale. Likewise, there are other examples as well which we can see here, like product satisfaction, in which we are basically terming the level of satisfaction, and they start from very unsatisfied to fairly unsatisfied, neutral, fairly satisfied and very satisfied. So again, here we are dealing with a ranking. There is a certain order which is involved here, and that's why this order basically defines the ordinal scale. Likewise, other examples like faculty rank and Standard and Poor's bond ratings and student grades, all these are different categories which have certain rank involved. So these ranks basically help us in differentiating these different types, and basically that's why ordinal scale is very much preferable, or categorical scale as well. Then we have got interval scale and ratio scale. Again, in this case, we are basically presenting the measurements in a more meaningful way. But in interval scale, these measurements don't have a true 0 point, whereas in ratio scale, these measurements do have a true 0 point here. That's why this is the scale which differentiates from ordinal scale here. So here we are dealing with various examples, and you can see here the temperature here is termed as the example of interval scale. Then standardized exam score is termed as interval scale, and the rest are ratio scales here. But when we will deal with the software, we will see that in specific cases, in most cases also, that in SPSS basically 3 scales exist for every variable which you will define there. One is the nominal scale, the second is the ordinal scale, and the third is simply termed as scale, which includes interval and ratio scale both. So from software point of view, interval and ratio scales are not that much clearly differentiated, and only this word scale is used. In SPSS, basically this combination of interval and ratio scale does give us a good advantage, because then there is not much differentiation, and then when we will tackle different variables and their types while entering them in SPSS, we will see that basically the scale or one scale is enough to represent both these levels of measurement there. Then basically what are the business objectives basically which focus on data collection? Here these are various examples. For example, research analyst, it needs to assess the effectiveness of a new television advertisement. So in order to do that, we have to collect the relevant data and analyze that. Then again, if a pharmaceutical manufacturer needs to know whether a new drug is effective or not, then an operations manager tries to find out and monitors the manufacturing process related to quality of product there. And then another example is related to an auditor, which basically wants to review the financial transaction and wants to determine whether the company is in accordance with the general accepted accounting principles. So these are different scenarios, different business issues in which the top boss or the manager wants to know about the details and wants to have them analyzed and then wants to decide something based on that information. So these are different business scenarios which basically keep on occurring within an organization again and again, and a manager has to see through these cases and then ensure that all the aspects are met. So these different situations which keep on arising in business organizations basically require a proper data collection and proper variable selection for those situations as well. So now when we are aware of the fact that specific collections require specific kind of data, so we have to be very careful while collecting this data. So first thing is that we should basically avoid flawed data, and basically there shouldn't be any biasness while collecting this data, and there are many other errors which should be avoided while collecting this data, because based on this data the analysis would be made, important conclusions will be made, and then important decisions will be made. So if the data collection from the very start is biased or flawed, then it will jeopardize the whole process. Then again, in this case, the main important thing is that if the data is flawed, then no matter how much sophisticated analysis technique we use, it would be of no use to us, because the results generated would not be of any use to us in that case. So that's why the flawlessness in the data collection process is of vital importance to us in this case, because this is the very foundation of quantitative business analysis. Based on this thing, there are two important data sources which are important and from where the data is collected. The first is the primary sources, and in this case the data collector basically is using the data for analysis. An example is that we use the data from a political survey, we can collect the data from an experiment, or we are collecting the data from our own observations. So these are the primary sources in which the data collector has got first-hand contact with the real situation. In secondary sources, however, basically the data analysis performed by the person is not the data collector. And here basically we have got printed data, or data which is there in census data, for example, or in print journals, in newspapers, data published on the internet or from any other source, which though has been stated by some other party, but you are using it on your own analysis, and that's why it's called secondary source. Primarily, both the sources are used for collection of data. In some studies, the data solely relies on primary source, whereas in some studies we only rely on secondary source, and few studies we require both the sources for collection of data here. So basically there are 5 categories which can be derived from here. In first case, like that data distributed by an organization or an individual, that can be one category. Then there is another one in which the data is obtained from outcomes of a designed experiment. So we are experimenting on something. Then the responses which we get from a survey, again this is the one option which is most frequently used in business organization data analysis, and that's why this technique is of prime importance. Then we have got the results for conducting an observational study, in which an experimenter or an analyst basically observe the phenomena occurring in the organization, and then the data is derived from that. Then again, the last and not the least is related to the data which is collected by ongoing business activities. So these business activities differ from organization to organization, and based on that the different forms of data are extracted from this thing. Then again, there are various examples available which in which the data is distributed by organization. For example, here financial data which is provided by company, then industrial data from market research firms or trade association. Then we have got stock prices, different weather conditions, sports statistics in daily newspapers, and other sources from where we can get such kind of data, and this is the data which is disseminated by organizations or individuals. Then we have got the examples of data from a designed experiment here, in which basically we are trying to test various kinds of products, and the consumer testing is going on for different versions of that specific product. Then we have got the material testing to test a product's quality and material. In this case, similarly, how we perform the market test for the alternative product promotions in order to see which promotion is more effective. So these are the different examples of data which is collected from different experiments, and these experiments happen often in business organizations, and it's not necessary that the term experiment is used in terms of natural sciences only. In social sciences, and specifically in business organizations, this design experiment phenomena is also followed. Then the third and most important kind is survey data, and in this we use the survey, which is also in the form of a questionnaire. We ask the people, for example, that which laundry detergent has the best stain removing capabilities. Then obviously you keep on seeing these political polls for registered voters during campaigns, and then again people are surveyed in order to know whether they are satisfied with a certain product or not. So these are different examples of this survey data tool, which is again one of the most frequent tools used in business studies here in this case. Then for observational studies, we can see that the market researchers utilize focus groups in order to have unstructured responses to open-ended questions. So these are observations in which we make a focus group, and then we try to observe their response, their expressions, their body language, and then try to document them. Then again, another example for observation study is that we try to measure the time which is taken by a restaurant to serve its customers, and then if we want to measure the traffic volume through a certain point, then we can observe it, and then we can get the relevant data out of it. So this is another of these three different situations in which observational data is relevant as compared to other cases. So then in case of ongoing business activities, the primary example is related to the study of bank of previous financial transactions in order to identify the patterns basically, and then again how the searches and various browsers are basically utilized to gather the data to help forecast future economic conditions. Again, these marketing companies use tracking data to effectively basically evaluate the website. So these are the examples which are related to the ongoing business activities and how we basically get the data from there. So basically data collection process can be done through various methods, and each method has got its own significance. But again, how that methodology is to be utilized depends upon the nature of data which is to be collected and also the nature of the problem which is to be tackled there. Then the most important concept in quantitative business analysis is related to the population, or a sample here in this case. So in terms of a population, we can say that it comprises of all the items or individuals, and basically from which we want to draw a conclusion, and this population is termed as a large group. So basically it comprises of the focus of your study. The focus of your study may comprise of textile industry or other manufacturing industry, so the population of that study would become that relevant industry and the workers which are working in there. But ideally it is very much true that it's not possible to cover the whole population. That means that we would have to draw upon data from a limited individuals, and then based on the responses from those individuals we would try to make conclusions, and then we would try to generalize them over the whole population. So that basically gives rise to a very important concept terms as sample, and in this case sample is the proportion of a portion of population selected for analysis, and then again it's a small group. So sample basically, and the method through which this sample is selected, that becomes that's of vital importance, because then if the sample is representative of the whole population, then we can generalize our findings to the whole population. Otherwise our findings from our analysis will only be limited to a certain sample and cannot be expanded to the whole population. So here basically you see the difference between a population and sample, in which in a population we are including all the individuals and items from which we want to draw the conclusions. Then we have got a sample, and we have got a portion of the population which is evident from here. So based on that, again, why is sample preferred? One thing is that it's less timely, it takes less time, and we collect every item in detail. You're saving our time, also it costs us less. Practically it's not that much easy to collect the information from whole population. One thing, time constraint, the second is also money constraint. And then again, another advantage of selecting a sample is that it's less cumbersome and it's more practical, to analyze than analyzing the entire population, because it's a huge data there. So based on these rhetorics, we can say that sampling is more preferred as compared to population here in this case. Then data cleaning is also a necessary activity when we collect the data, because the data which is collected, it comprises of errors, it comprises of issues, it's not ideal, and the values basically can result in abnormal circumstances. So in this case the irregularities are related to data entry errors or typography, or values which are not possible, which cannot be defined. Then we have got missing values as well, because some respondents do not respond, they don't give enough information. So based on that, most of the information may not be complete, and most of the questions in our survey may not be answered. So there are missing values here as well. Then another important issue is that outliers, because extremely large values or extremely small values or extremely abnormal reaction or extremely abnormal readings or options given by the respondents, they do affect us in our analysis. So that's why it's very much important that we find these irregularities and we address them, because we have to clean such data. Otherwise, our results of the analysis will not be meaningful at all, and we cannot generalize them to the whole population. So much of the statistics dealing is also related with the data treatment, how to treat this data, how to streamline this data without killing the originality of the data. That's of main concern. So these irregularities should be reviewed and addressed, and there are various means to address such kind of irregularities. So based on that, data cleaning phenomena is often necessary, and again, we do not commence with our main analysis once we are sure that our original data is normal. So then again, we have to also recode variables, and which basically then comes upon the supplementation and replacement of original variable. And in this case, once we recode the variable, we also recode their categories as well. So basically, when we are using such thing, then it is to be we should make sure the new categories are exclusive and exhaustive, as well as they should cover more values. So basically, recoding a variable is effective in translating that variable in another form, and also to identify hidden patterns within that specific set, and the conventional way of keeping the variable as it is may not be helping us at all. So that's why recoding a variable is of vital importance, and we will discuss further that SPSS software has got various facilitation tools to help us recode variables in any form we like. So then again, what is our sampling process? And as we know, that sampling process basically is started with a frame, also termed as sampling frame here as well. Now, sampling frame comprises of the list of all the items or respondents within a population. So basically, once we are dealing with frames, these are data sources related to population list or directions or maps. Basically, again, it is very much important that the sampling frame requires accurate information, and inaccuracy of these results can then destroy the credibility of this whole phenomena. So basically, we can use different frames to generate data, and it can lead to dissimilar conclusions as well, because once we change the frame, then we are dealing an issue. We are facing problem regarding how to differentiate between these types. So basically, these different cases regarding sampling frame are very much important in documenting the whole population, and then selecting and extracting the sample through a proper way. Then we are dealing with the various types of sampling which are of importance here. Primarily, there are two types. One is non-probability sample, the other is probability sample here. In non-probability sampling, we are dealing with judgment sample, then we have got convenience sampling. In case of judgment sampling, basically the sample is drawn based on one's own judgment, and in this case the biasness of the researcher is involved, because there is no set criteria, and the researcher can choose anyone he likes, and based on that a sample can be drawn. But then again, in realistic terms, that sample cannot be generalized, because it's pure on judgment, and there are too much biasness involved for the researcher, and that does not make it one of the preferred sampling types which should be pursued. Then we have got convenience sampling. Again, it's kind of the same, but convenience sampling comprises of the method in which one just tries to assess those candidates which are easily available, and whoever he meets and who are easily available, he will get the data from them. So this kind of sampling is convenience sampling. Again, the convenience sampling is not that much preferred now, because the values which are obtained have quite a high probability of getting inaccurate data and having biasness of the researcher, which does affect the transparency of the research study or the business organization study which is being conducted there. Then we have got probability sampling, in which we have got 4 main types. One is simple random sampling, then we have got systematic sampling here, and third is stratified and cluster. So once we are dealing with simple random, we are basically going through random probability. We will discuss that in detail. Now, as you can see here, this is pretty much explained what is convenience sampling, and in which basically the items are selected based on the fact that they are easy, inexpensive, convenient to sample. Then in judgment sample, we get the opinions of the pre-selected experts in the subject matter. Again, both of these have got biasness involved in them. That's why they are not that much preferred as compared to probability sampling. Then in case of probability sampling, we have already discussed in detail the 4 most common types. One is simple random, the other is systematic, third is stratified, and then there is cluster. So in simple random, basically every individual item has got an equal chance to get selected again. However, there are 2 main types which need to be considered. One is the sampling can be done with replacement, and in this case the individual is returned to frame for possible reselection. So there are equal chances that that item is reselected again when we try to run the sample procedure. Then there is another type termed as without replacement, and in which basically the selected item is not returned to the frame. So there is no chance that that item is included again. Then we have got samples which are obtained from table of random numbers or computer random number generators. Now this is the most common type which is being used, because manually it's not that much easy now to make sampling frames and try to assess the values. So once you put all the values in your software, it will generate random cases and random sample, which makes our job very much easier. So basically these are the various aspects, and here you can see an example in which we have got a random number table, and in this case you can see this whole portion basically of values is there, and we have got the sampling frame which is clear cut mentioned here, and based on that we just take first 5 items in a simple random sampling. So each item has got an equal chance of getting selected, and therefore it is preferred to use random number sampling. Then we have got another type which is a similar type for random sampling, but it has got more procedures involved, in which we are a bit more systematic. We have got a certain sample size which we have already decided upon, and then we have got a divide frame of n individuals into group of k individuals. So basically we divide the k is equal to n divided by n. So we randomly select one individual from the first group, and after that every kth individual afterwards is selected. So that makes it a more systematic approach to random sampling here, and thus this is kind of preferred over other methods. Then we have got another important sampling type termed as stratified sampling, and in which we do make strata. We make groups in which within the groups the people who are like-minded are selected, or who have got similar characteristics are selected here. Now here in this case we divide the population into 2 or more subgroups called strata, and basically based on that from each subgroup simple random sampling is conducted and people are selected. So basically this comprises of simple random stratified sampling, because there are two techniques which are involved in selecting the sample. One, that you randomly select the sample, then we basically put the sample proportional to strata sizes. So both of these techniques are normally used in combination with each other, and hence they are preferred also. So in today's lecture, basically we had a detailed discussion about what's data and what is a variable, what is statistics which is involved in that. Then we had a discussion about what are the various types of variable, and these types include categorical variable, discrete variable, continuous variable, and then we had a discussion about the levels of measurement which are involved, and in this case we had a clear-cut discussion on what is nominal scale, what is ordinal scale, and what is interval and ratio scale. Again, we explained that these variables are not as it is defined in SPSS, and there's a kind of a different criteria for that. We discussed that in detail, and we will also see that in future lectures. Then based on that, we also discussed about the sources of data, because they are of vital importance, and we discussed that there are two primary sources in which one will follow. The one is primary source, the other is secondary source. Based on these two, basically these important conclusions are made. Preferably primary source is selected, and then we have got levels of measurement in this case, which we have already discussed in detail, that what do we mean by nominal scale, interval ratio scale, and then we have ordinal scale. Basically these levels of measurement are of vital importance in defining the foundation of the quantitative business analysis, and based on that further analysis is pursued. Then we have got different sampling types which we discussed in detail, and in this we clear-cut discussed what are the different sampling types under non-probability sampling and probability sampling. So we discussed in detail that what do we mean by these different sample types, and how these sample types are selected, and which sample type is more effective, which is not, and how we are going to determine which sample type suits our purpose. Normally, as we have discussed before, that random sampling and systematic sampling and stratified sampling are normally used in combination. So basically this is kind of vital that these sampling types are selected properly, and based on that further analysis is commenced, because only through that we would be able to draw some conclusions which are unbiased. So based on these sampling types, we also discussed about the stratified sampling. And stratified, we discussed how we try to form a strata, and how these values are basically tested, and how they are included in the sample. So based on that, other concrete conclusions are then made afterwards in this case. So basically this whole subject basically is related and revolving around this phenomena of variables, and how basically these variables are tackled, how we are able to collect unbiased data, and how we have to go through our obligations in fulfilling the fact that the data obtained is unbiased, it's not fake. So basically this was related to today's lecture. I hope you understand it. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.